Hello and welcome to More Than a Lumpy Jumper, the podcast where we talk leadership, life and lessons learned, often the hard way. This season, we're journeying around the wheel of life, a simple but powerful coaching tool that helps us notice the different parts of life that shape our sense of balance, notice when we're thriving, where we're stretched thin, and where small shifts can make a big difference. This week I'm flying solo because Bobby is away on a fabulous adventure in Costa Rica. But I'm joined by the lovely Silvia Risi from Co-Create Humanity to explore the impact our work environment has on our lives. Silvia is a humanitarian who's worked for many years with organisations such as CESV, Première Urgence, FAO and the Norwegian Refugee Council in post-conflict countries including DRC, Chad, Haiti and Afghanistan. Since deciding to leave war zones behind, she's focused on supporting humanitarians in their work through mentoring and coaching and working as a mental health peer supporter with Co-Create Humanity, a Swiss-based organisation dedicated to supporting humanitarian workers through psychosocial and holistic solutions. So come and join us as we explore the slice of the wheel that takes up so much of our lives in Being on Purpose. Hi, and so welcome to the lovely Silvia Risi, and thank you so much for coming. Now, I just have to explain that unfortunately Bobby is unable to join us because she's buggered off to Costa Rica and is having an amazing time making me feel very jealous with all of her Facebook and social media posts about what a wonderful time she's having. So Silvia, you're stuck with me, just me.
Hi, Bridget. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very, very happy. And as I was telling you, this is my first time being the guest in a podcast, so I'm also a bit nervous, but happy to be here with you. And again, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming, and I will do my best to not make you feel
Thank you.
nervous. But normally, what we do at the beginning of the episode is we get our guests to just introduce themselves in their own words and talk about who they are rather than what they do. So, who is Silvia?
It's a very good question, and not necessarily an easy one, because I think maybe it's sometimes easy to say who we are through what we do instead of really saying who we are, and I can see a difference in that. For me, it also implies embodying who we are. So thank you for the question. That also pushes me to think harder and deeper about me. Well, first of all, I am Italian. I'm going towards my 50s, which I think it's a very interesting time of our life, and sometimes a time that, brings change. And this is definitely my case. I am a humanitarian aid worker. I am a humanitarian mental health peer supporter. I am a tour leader and I'm a coach. And if I may just add something to this to clarify a little bit also my journey, I've been in the field of humanitarian work for 16 years, working in conflict and post-conflict contexts and loving it. That was my life. That was as it goes. It was my identity. 3 years ago, for a lot of reasons, and maybe we can talk about this a bit later, I've decided to not to go on a mission anymore, or to sort of transition out of the sector, so to say. And that's also how I think, the reason why I'm here with you today, so we'll get back to that afterwards, but I started this new role in my life as a mental health peer supporter. And I've also decided to embrace in a different way what my passions are, what my interests are, and that's where also the coaching and the tour leading come. And of course, it looks like there is no connection between all this, but for me there is, because tour leading is an answer that I gave to a long-time passion of mine, of traveling and of getting to know different countries and cultures and people and beauty, also the beauty that we have around us. But also traveling is something that helped me a lot when I was going through tough times recently. So it is very much part of who I am. And at a certain point, I decided also I wanted to share this passion I have also with other people, and also the possibility of showing the beauty of my country to other people. And the coaching is also very much linked to this idea of supporting other people. And for me, it goes back to this desire to help and find the purpose also, definitely. But to be useful, to make a difference in this world and this life that I've been given by helping other people. As I was doing it so much, as you know, while you work as a humanitarian aid worker, I then decided that I didn't want to give this up, and I wanted to continue as much as I could to contribute to humanity, but in a very different way. And this is for me another way of embracing a passion and a purpose that drives me, and it's always driven me in my life. So there's a lot of change, there's a lot of transition in all of this. I can see a line that is connecting all the dots and all of this. So when I was saying at the beginning that I'm going towards my 50s, that sometimes I bring also change and transitions. That's where my transition is happening at the moment. Very exciting, not always easy, but to have had this opportunity also to consider this, at this time of my life, the possibility of transitioning. And of course, the reason also why we're talking today, we spoke also before, this, again, possibility to help and support other people through mental health, peer support, and specifically helping humanitarian aid workers. So this is definitely something that is driving me at the moment as a major part of my life.
It's super interesting, this idea of transitioning. And I think that, this particular episode, we're talking about the work environment and how it fits in to the life wheel, which as a coach, I'm sure you're familiar with. And I was really keen when we looked at this part of the wheel, or the splatters, actually, we're calling it, because it never is a complete wheel, because we never achieve 10 on everything. I just wanted also to emphasize the sort of aspect of work environments that are fairly extreme. So I wanted to take this one to the extreme, where there are huge stresses on people, and whether that is from toxic work environments, traumatic work environments, working with other people who are going through trauma. And so it's not just humanitarians, obviously, it can be health workers, emergency workers, all kinds of things. And to look at it in the extreme so that the lessons can be applicable to everyone in the work environment, but maybe not in such an extreme way. And I know that Bobby and I have done an episode a while back after I left the UN for the first time. We were talking about what do you do in a toxic work environment? And actually, at the time, I was like, sometimes you just have to leave.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's not an option for many people, because you have to pay the mortgage, and people have obligations, and they've got kids in school, or parents they need to look after, or pets they need to look after. So I came across Co-Create Humanity, which I think we will talk about. When I had decided to leave the UN, I just had reached a burnout, and my mental health was appalling. And it took me 2 years to even get close to starting to recover properly. And so I came across Co-Create Humanity, and I was really fascinated by it. So I'd be really interested maybe for you to explain to the listeners this idea of what is Co-Create Humanity and how you have become involved in it.
Thank you so much for the question, Bridget. It's a real pleasure to talk about Co-Create Humanity. I got involved with the association roughly a year ago. It was September 2024. For those who don't know the association, it's a Swiss association that was founded in 2019 with the purpose of providing psychosocial support to humanitarian aid workers. And it does that mostly to three main pillars. One is peer support. The other is also providing support and advocacy through art and music, advocating for the importance of mental health and well-being for humanitarian aid workers. And the third pillar is the professionalization of peer support. Of course, those who are interested, please have a look at the website, which is www.cocreatehumanity.org, because all the activities are explained on the website. You can also get to know the team, what we do, who we are, how we do it. It's both in French and in English, so it's very accessible. There are also videos, and on that you can also find a YouTube channel for Co-Create Humanity, where there are webinars that are held on several topics that are all related to humanitarian aid workers and their mental health and well-being. So I got involved with the association because, as you mentioned, the work in the humanitarian sector, it is so rewarding, and at the same time it can be extremely stressful, extremely sometimes draining, difficult, and all encompassing. When before I was saying that being a humanitarian aid worker was part of my identity, part of who I was, and there is still a part of me, absolutely, that would immediately jump up and say I'm a humanitarian aid worker, because once a humanitarian, always a humanitarian for me, because it is absorbing completely sometimes our life and our being. So as rewarding as it can be, there is a downside that is exactly how the risk also of incurring into difficult situation, toxic working environment. You mentioned also vicarious trauma, so the constantly exposed also to human suffering, compassion fatigue, traumatic events, burnout, of course. So there are a lot of also risks that we take with this amazing, I would say, job. So I was not different from many other people. I went through a burnout a couple of times. 3 years ago, I understood afterwards, already burned out. I experienced also a situation of psychological harassment in the office. I was afterwards diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So that was definitely a changer in my life, a moment of change when I realized that I needed to take care of myself. I needed to put myself first for once. And that I will come back to this maybe afterwards, but just to finish how I got involved with Co-Create Humanity. I was, walking along my recovery journey. I came across the association. I attended the webinar, and then for a few months, I wasn't really thinking about it, but one day I decided to look at the website again, and I found this amazing thing, which was peer support. And I was very curious to know how I could become a professional peer supporter. And so I got in touch with the association, and then I was asked if I was also interested to integrate the peer support team. And for me, it was a no-brainer. It was immediately a yes, because for me, I was given the opportunity to turn something that was definitely negative into something positive. The opportunity to use my lived experience to support other people that maybe are going through something similar or different but traumatic. For me, it was a great opportunity I was given. And so I accepted, and it has been quite a ride afterwards. And I have to mention Hélène Ross, who is one of the co-founders and the president of the association, who is an amazing human being, amazing person, and a volcano in terms of ideas. So she cares a lot about providing us with training and professional and technical training. So the idea that peer support cannot be improvised is definitely driving and leading Co-Create Humanity. So afterwards, after I joined the association, I've already been, receiving, and I say receiving because it's really been a gift, several trainings. There will be more coming. We have one coming, for example, in November in Switzerland for those who joined the association in 2025. I, together with Hélène and other two people, will also start a university diploma in France shortly, in 10 days, on mental health, peer support, and neurodiversity. We are very serious about becoming professional of peer support in mental health.
Sylvia, before we go any further, so the idea of peer support, and I think I know what it is, for a lot of our listeners who are not working in quite so much traumatic environments, albeit many are working in toxic environments. Just would you be able to explain what is peer
Yeah.
support? Because, in theory, I can see that it could still also be used in other sectors. It doesn't have to just be for humanitarians. And I just wondered how it differs from mentoring.
Thank you, Bridget. Definitely. We're talking about, in this specific case, peer support in the humanitarian space, but you're absolutely right. In fact, peer support is born in other domains and in other sectors. And we're talking about applying it to the humanitarian sector for a specific reason, because it definitely is relevant also for the sector. But to answer your question, the idea of peer support is really the idea to put lived and living experience at the center of a recovery journey. First of all, the idea of peer support brings the person who needs support at the center of the relationship. So the idea of empowering, of agency, of taking our own life in our hands and not being just a recipient of treatment or of support is very much at the center of peer support. As the word also says, a relationship between peers. So there is no bottom up or top down relationship. It's very equal relationship. So much so that I can say out of my experience that there is so much that we learn also when we do this, that we learn from the people we are accompanying. So we put our personal experience at the center of the relationship that we build with people that need support. At the same time, the person is really encouraged to take ownership, of course, of their journey, of their life. And there is this idea that having lived, having gone through this, puts you in a position that will allow you to provide the support that other professionals could not provide. And in the case of the humanitarian sector, I think that is particularly relevant because you know how unique this sector is. You know how some dynamics are very proper to this sector, and having an understanding of the problems, the difficulties that other people may be facing is very important. It's not the only thing. I also want to stress the fact that peer support does not want to replace psychotherapy. Absolutely no. We're not aiming at that. This is something that can be complementary, absolutely. The two things can coexist, but we're very clear on the fact that it's important, and that's why I also was telling you that we train, because knowing our limits, to which extent we can go and where we have to stop, and where we have, for example, to refer somebody to a professional support is also part of who we aim to be in terms of professional peer supporters. So the concept of recovery is also at the center of this relationship. And recovery, when I say recovery, is a journey that it's not linear. It has ups and downs. It can be long. Before also you mentioned that it can take time before we even start feeling better. Yes, it can take time. There is no fixed time, absolutely. But it's important to consider this because it is also somehow comforting to understand that our journey can be, ups and downs, not necessarily a straight line, and that having somebody that can listen to us because they understand what we're going through. Maybe they've been there before, or they understand what we're talking about because they understand the dynamics. And because they've already also gone through this recovery journey, they can also share on, how they live their own recovery journey, what can be useful in terms of also psychosocial support, being able to reconnect with people, with society, being able to function basically.
Yeah. Can I then? It's interesting to hear that, as you say, that you make it very clear that this can be complementary
Yeah.
with psychologists or psychotherapists. So I would say that I've seen this to an extent as a veteran. So I'm a military veteran and also with a diagnosis of PTSD. And I've been really supported by an organization called Op Courage, which is specifically for
Yeah.
British military veterans and provides mental health or professional psychosocial
Yeah.
therapy for veterans who are in need of it. And it's provided in a way that is simple and straightforward. So whereas often getting that sort of assistance if you're not a veteran in our normal
Yeah.
National Health Service can be a long drawn out process. And so I've seen personally how important it is to recognize that need and been very impressed by the support that's been provided. But I am really interested in this idea of the peer support as well. But when you talk about that you're able to then share some of your coping
Yeah.
mechanisms or the things that you have done, I'm interested in possibly if you'd be able to share maybe some of the things that you have learnt on your journey that some of the listeners might find helpful. You were talking about the body, and I know that Bobby will kill me if I don't talk about or mention or give the opportunity for discussion about somatic work, because she works in
Yeah.
somatic coaching and she's all about the body and all about the getting out of your head and not being a walking head. And I too have done some somatic work as part of my journey and found it very, very helpful. So, for example, the work of Peter Levine. Is it Peter Levine? Are you familiar with his work? He was the creator, I think, or one of the trailblazers in somatic
Not
body
really
work for
familiar.
therapy. I don't know if you ever tried it, somatic shaking. So he kind of not created it, but crystallized some of that approach. And so yeah, for me, I actually have found that somatic shaking can be very helpful, although a bit odd. I know that people find it very odd, but every now and then putting on some music and then just
Yeah.
going for a shake can just get rid of some of my
Yeah.
anxiety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just say that because you mentioned the military, and this is really spot on. We work closely with the French military when it comes to peer support, because there is already a lot that exists in terms of peer support within the military. So we do collaborate with the French military and also firefighters. You know, this type of, I would say, professions that also put people really on the front line. So as you mentioned this, it's really important to say, as I was saying before, that peer support exists since a long time in certain domains and sectors, and for some reason that it's, to be honest, I'm still struggling to understand, it doesn't really exist yet in the humanitarian sector. That has, a lot of, similar implications to this profession. So thank you for mentioning this, and thank you for bringing up also the aspect of, also of dealing with trauma. For example, I'm reading the book which is called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, which is amazing. So it's really the idea that trauma reshapes both the brain and the body, and it stresses how healing requires more than just talk therapy, but requires really engaging the body, emotions, and relationships. So coming back to what you were saying, also, listening to music and shaking, the idea that we probably tend to think that traumatic event only has consequences of our brain and mind, but no. And I think that those who have gone through that learn it the hard way, basically. And so it's really powerful, this idea of, also thinking at this physical level when it comes to addressing traumatic event and its consequences. And the book also provides some evidence-based methods that can be used also to help the body and brain reconnect. And because you asked me also what was helpful for me, and I'm very happy to share. And I would also like, of course, to say we're all different. So it's really about also finding what our personal medicine is, what makes us feel good. I use the term personal medicine because there is a great scholar and psychologist, Patricia Deegan, who also works on this. And those who are interested, I would recommend that you also look her up and see her work in terms of, so stressing how we are all different, and so we do have different things that make us feel better, that are our personal medicine. So if I have to think about my personal medicine when I was going through this tough time recently, I really had to look deeply into me to see, not that I didn't know my passions, but I needed to look to refine them, because for a long time I had put the work before me, other people before me, so much so that I'm not saying that I didn't exist, but I needed to refine myself. And the way I did it was to, it was somehow liberating. I am passionate about traveling. Okay, when I can, I know that it's not always you can take the time off and do that. It requires resources and so on, but something small, even just few hours, a short trip. Something that for me was important in traveling was the idea of reconnecting with beauty. So for me, the most important thing that really helped me was reconnecting myself with beauty. Beauty could be a painting, could be a beautiful music, a melody, a song, a poem, a book, or a beautiful landscape. I mean, we are surrounded by beauty. So the idea of going and finding it, even just for a few hours and enjoying the moment, was definitely something that helped me a lot. I also had to reconnect with my body. And so understanding that, I need to take the time regularly to also exercise. Exercising being one of the most important activity that we can do to really also for our brain, for our mind. So taking a walk, going for a swim, small things really. I've never been a great sport person, but small things like enjoying going outside, breathing the air, being in the sun, walking, swimming, taking a book, just the idea of having some time for myself. Sometimes that I didn't have to go for deadlines, or that I had to read that article, I had to write that thing, just reading whatever I wanted to read in the moment. I also like singing. I've never trained, but I like singing. And I say that because I know that is also something that is the idea of ourselves creating something that can be artistic. Music is definitely very, very helpful.
You're touching on so many elements that we've had in our episodes on the wheel, actually, on the different sectors. So we've had an episode on art and fun, and we've had an episode on the environment and also engaging with
Yeah.
nature and how important that is, and one on spirituality, but finding spirituality, how it can be beauty and it can be about creation rather than particularly
Yeah.
engaging with a supreme being. So it's really interesting that you're touching on all of those things. And as I told you before we started recording, one of the reasons that originally Bobby wasn't going to be on this episode was because she was going to be singing with the Military Wives
Yeah.
Choir at Waterloo Station. And she has found huge solace in singing as part
Yes.
of a choir, which also linked into another sector, which is
Yes.
community and being part
Exactly.
of a community. And so, one of the big themes of this whole season has been that actually pretty much all of the sectors in the wheel are so
Yes.
interlinked. And I just wondered if you had any comment, particularly in your experience as a coach, about how the work environment and the work environments we find ourselves in can impact on our whole
Oh,
life.
absolutely. Absolutely. That is, besides me as a coach, me as, having gone through this personally, absolutely. And, when we talk about the humanitarian sector, which is my experience in terms of working in a work environment, it's pretty specific, but it isn't unique in the way that a lot of situations and mechanisms and dynamics that we can experience in this sector, we can find in many other sectors. So burnout is more and more common, unfortunately, and it's not only in the aid sector, I would say, it's across the board. So I would say that unfortunately, because definitely when we think about the impact that certain working environment dynamics can have on our life, in general, negative impact. So I would say unfortunately, the impact that working environments can have on our life it can be pretty significant. So I can speak for my own experience, and definitely what I've been through, that also led me to this diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, has definitely, of course, impacted my life in a very significant way. I would also say that it's been rough, it's been a journey which is still ongoing, but I also know that there's been a lot of positives that have come out of this journey. I don't want to see it only as negative, but dynamics that can impact ourselves in the whole life, not only in the moment that we spend in the office with our colleagues, but being constantly stressed, the long hours that we're always asked to work because of shortage of staff in the office politics can also be extremely to manage. The typical toxic working environment where you may be working under a leadership that is not particularly sensitive to these aspects of staff well-being. The idea that basically we are there to perform and that's it. Now, this is something that is extremely important, and I'm very, very passionate about this, because the idea of, squeezing people until they break and always counting on their own resilience, it is so dangerous, because we are there to serve other people, right? We are there to serve communities, vulnerable communities. So how can we really do it if we're not well? How can we really be of any help to other people if we are not in our body, in our mind? It's impossible. So it is so important to stress the role that leadership, management can play in creating positive work environments. Positive meaning also where people can grow, where people can perform, but also find satisfaction, pleasure, happiness, when good relationships can also be established. Performance is important. The results are always there, and we always have lock frames or other things to remind us of the objectives that we work for. But at the end of the day, the quality of what we do depends so much also on the relationship that we're capable to establish of our own well-being. So I think this is so normal to think about it. Like, after I've also started this journey as a coach, and it's a duty of a coach to take care of themselves, to think to their well-being. So why not in a profession like aid workers? So why are we not encouraged to take care of our own well-being? Why are we not given the time, the opportunity, the resources to do that? The humanitarian aid sector in this respect I think is very much behind to other sectors in this respect. And to be very honest, I still don't understand how it is possible to think that what we do in the field can exist irrespective of the condition and of the health of the people that make the sector. The sector would be nothing without the workforce and the people that work in it and the people that are also dealing with the communities. So if these people are unwell, how can we really have good results, sustainable results, and make a difference and an impact? And I think that this is even more relevant now that the sector is going through such hardships in terms of funding. So it's even more relevant.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm so happy you've made this reference to leadership, because it is one of my massive bugbears. And I completely agree that the humanitarian sector, certainly as far as I can see, is so far behind thinking in so many corporate entities that do this so much
Yeah.
better. I'm not saying all corporate entities do by any means, but have always found it staggering that organizations claim that their values are about caring and about people are so bad at looking after the people that are supposed to be delivering that caring
Exactly.
to, as you said, vulnerable communities. And when I see in the corporate world organizations that invest in their front facing, their client facing people, always perform much
Yeah.
better. And in a way, humanitarians in the field are effectively the client facing personnel within the organization, the CEOs, etc., who are sat in New York or Geneva or wherever the hell they're sat with their diplomatic cars, not having to worry about parking, and their UN funded lunches, whatever it is. In any good business, you would invest in the people that are closest to the
Absolutely.
client, because otherwise they're not going to perform and they're not going to be able to deliver, and the client won't get what they want. And I've never understood why the humanitarian sector fails to
Absolutely.
get that. And also, I was going to say something very profound, then I've forgotten what it is. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a book called The Idealist
Yeah.
Survival Kit,
Yes.
75
I
Simple
read it.
Ways to Avoid Burnout. And there's a whole bit in there by the author who talks about why it's the organizational norms that are causing a lot of the
Yeah.
problem. This issue of neglecting staff well-being, creating hero narratives, not wanting to change, and where they rely on this
Yes.
idealism that most humanitarians have. And I'm being slightly cynical here, that it's all about the children sort of
Yeah.
attitude, which is you just have to keep going. Well, I know it's terribly tough, thoughts and prayers, but if you don't do this extra work, if you don't work 20 hours a day, if you don't give up your holidays, if you don't sacrifice
Exactly.
yourself, because the organization won't,
Yeah.
doesn't care, then it's the vulnerable communities that suffer. And so there really is this massive play on our dedication and our idealism
Yeah.
and our wish to do good. Also, I think that there's this whole pressure or belief that it's down to the individual to manage their
Yes.
own
Exactly.
resilience. And I just don't agree. Obviously, there is an element of we have responsibility for our own resilience, but if the organization makes it impossible,
Absolutely.
then we can try as hard as we like. This
Yeah.
idea of in a normal environment, you would say, in order to protect you, sort your resilience out, you set boundaries, you will have open communication, you will create an environment where there's psychological safety, where you're able to speak or to address issues. And in my experience, more often than not, and I won't say it doesn't happen 100% of the time, that none of those things are in place within the
Exactly.
humanitarian sector. Generally, leadership is incredibly
Yeah.
poor. Leaders, inverted commas, in the humanitarian sector, in my experience, generally are not, don't have the correct skill sets to actually lead. And everyone is so
Yeah.
focused on job
Yeah.
frames that they don't make time to deliver. And I've got to be honest, although I also think a lot of the leaders are suffering from burnout,
Yeah.
because it goes all the way up. And actually, even if you are a leader who is trying your best to be a good leader, there is so little time to dedicate to good
That's true.
leadership, because it does
That's true.
take time
Yeah.
to be a good leader, to engage with your staff, to check how they are, to create the space for them to be able to speak and to learn and to grow and to thrive. And so, yeah, I think there's lots and lots of lessons that are still need to be learned. And as you said, currently, because of the squeeze in terms of finance, the very first thing that goes out the window
It's this.
when finances are squeezed is
Yeah.
leadership and well-being of
Absolutely.
staff, which is
It,
a
it is,
tragedy
it is.
as
And
far as
thank you
I'm
so
concerned.
much for mentioning this, Bridget, because I do agree absolutely with you that leaving it to individual resilience, it's a big mistake. I would rather talk about institutional, organizational resilience. The organization needs to be resilient for their own staff to be able to thrive and to build their own resilience. But I remember so many times that we were just summoned to 1 or 2 hours webinar on techniques, relaxation techniques, right? How to release your stress during the day, which is great. It's great, but then you keep receiving emails at 11 p.m. At midnight, and everything is urgent. So how can you really build your own well-being? And this is exactly what organizations do. They just put it on the responsibility of the individuals to build their own resilience. And I'm not discussing on how important it is to build resilience, but if everything around us is not going along, I can be as resilient as possible, but then sooner or later I will probably, break. And I wanted to share also another book which is great in terms of this topic, Psychological Support for Humanitarian Aid Workers by Fiona Dunkley. It's a great book because it also gives names to things. And I think it's so important to name things the correct way. So it helped me a lot to understand also my own burnout and also how this burnout was linked to certain dynamics within the sector and also what could be done on the way forward. So this is a great reading. And the good thing is that I think there is more attention towards these topics and these subjects over the past few years. Recently, also at the end of June, the Europe Office for WHO launched a roadmap for the integration of lived and living experience in policies and support, and how to integrate this also in infrastructures and services that provide mental health support. I know also a lot of organizations that pay more and more attention to this, but as you said, the risk is that because of the reduction of funding, the first things that is cut is exactly this, because it doesn't really if it's not linked to the results that we have to get in the field. So it's like to seeing things as if they are separate, but I really like to think that there is a clear equation to me between staff well-being and impact.
Absolutely.
So I really, really hope to see the day when there will be no more need to advocate for this, to fight for this, that the staff well-being, as you were saying, that in other sectors is central to their own management style. And I really, really long to see the day when this will happen also in the humanitarian sector.
Thank you so much. And I could continue talking on this topic for so much more. I really appreciate your insights and the work that you are doing to support humanitarians. And as you said, create something good and optimistic out of maybe some elements that have been difficult and hard to deal with. So we're at the end of the recording. Really, really, really thank you so much. I know you were nervous and I know you were a bit like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, I
Why
was
do you
very
want me to
nervous.
go on here? But it's been really super interesting to hear about all of the things that you are doing and that Co-Create Humanity are doing, and how elements of it all link into any of our
Yes.
work, any type of work in any sector. So thank you so much for joining, Silvia. Now, what Bobby normally does at the end of the episode is she has a quote, she reads a quote, and I never get to do one because it's her thing and she gets annoyed if I interfere with it. So I've got one. In fact, I have two. And one was from the amazing and iconic Dolly Parton, which is, don't get so busy making a living that you forget to make a life. And I think that kind of relates to this thing
Yes.
that where sometimes we sacrifice ourselves for this identity that we have adopted as a
Yeah.
humanitarian. But maybe the more relevant one is by Jessica Green, and it says, leadership is about service. Toxic environments stem from leaders who forget they are servants. And that for me is really pertinent, because when I was trained as a leader in the military and with Bobby, the phrase, that's the wrong word, but I can't think of anything else at the moment, it's like, is of the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst is serve to lead.
Yes.
So we were taught to be servant leaders. And I think one of the issues often with organizations is that they forget that the leadership is there to serve not only the vulnerable communities, but the staff that make huge sacrifices to do that.
Bridget, it was really a pleasure for me. Thank you for this opportunity again. I would encourage anyone who is interested in the work that we do for peer support to go and check our website, and consider also that all that we offer is for free. And I would say with our heart. There's a lot of heart in what we do. And one thing that I would like to really say that I've learned personally is be kind to yourself, because you deserve it. And for me, it's the main takeaway that I have out of a lot of things that I've been through. And we tend to forget to be kind and gentle to ourselves. And we also have to consider that we deserve it.
Perfect. Actually, much better quote than mine.
Oh, no.
Thank you so much, Silvia. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your insights and experience with us. Bye. So that's where we'll leave today's conversation, with the reminder that our work doesn't have to be our identity, and we can find support in balancing the needs of work and other sectors of the wheel by reaching out both internally and externally. As we've moved around the wheel this season, we've heard from so many brilliant guests sharing their stories, insights, and practical ways to bring balance into our lives. For our penultimate episode, Being Open, we'll be joined by Jocelyn Penk-Saunders of the Dating Classroom, exploring the relationship segment. You don't want to miss it. For now, thank you for listening to More Than a Lumpy Jumper, and if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Share it with someone who might need support in setting boundaries or some ideas about managing challenging work environments. Take care.